The gas station parking lot was dead quiet at 2 a.m. Just fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the smell of diesel hanging in the cold November air. Then the sound cut through the silence. Deep, throaty, unmistakable. 5 motorcycles rolling in like thunder, chrome gleaming under the harsh lights. Outlaws, MC Texas chapter. The kind of men who didn't ask permission and didn't need to explain themselves. The clerk inside locked the door. A couple getting coffee through the drive-thru quickly rolled up their windows. An 18-wheeler driver finishing his cigarette crushed it under his boot and climbed back into his cab without looking up. Fear. Pure, instinctive fear. But then something happened that nobody expected. An old man had to be pushing 80, stepped out of a beat-up Chevy truck parked by Pump 3. White hair, flannel shirt, worn jeans, walking with a slight limp. He didn't look away, didn't hurry back to his vehicle. Instead, he walked straight toward the bikers. The lead rider cut his engine. The others followed. Silence again, but heavier this time. Dangerous. The old man stopped 3 feet from the leader. A massive man with a scarred face, arms covered in ink, eyes that had seen things most people only have nightmares about. His name was Marcus Reaper Dalton, though nobody in that parking lot knew it yet. And then the old man spoke, his voice steady, clear, fearless. "Excuse me, sir. My granddaughter has a tattoo exactly like that one on your forearm." Every head turned, not toward the bikers, toward the old man who just said something impossible. Because the tattoo he was pointing at wasn't just ink, it was a brand. A mark that meant blood, brotherhood, and a code most people would never understand, and nobody, absolutely nobody outside the club, should have it. Marcus stared down at this old man. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and when he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, but you could hear the edge in it. "What did you just say?" "Before we find out what happens next, do me a favor. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what unfolds in the next 15 minutes is going to change everything you think you know about loyalty, family, and the invisible debts that bind us together. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single second of this. Let me ask you something. When you see bikers pull up next to you, what's your first thought? Lock your doors? Avoid eye contact? Assume they're trouble? Most people do. Society trains us to see the leather, the patches, the tattoos, and immediately think, danger. But what if everything you've been taught to fear is wrong? What if the people who look the most dangerous are actually the ones who live by a code of honor most of us abandoned a long time ago? The old man standing in that gas station parking lot was named Frank Morrison, 79 years old, Vietnam veteran, widower, grandfather to 3. He'd spent his entire life in a small town outside Austin, worked 40 years at the same factory, went to the same church every Sunday, never caused trouble, never looked for it. But Frank Morrison wasn't afraid of much. And he definitely wasn't afraid of bikers, because 15 years ago, his granddaughter saved one of their lives. Let's go back. June 2009, Interstate 10, just outside San Antonio. Late afternoon, heat shimmering off the asphalt like a mirage, a group of 4 outlaws were riding back from a rally in Louisiana. Marcus Reaper Dalton was riding second in formation, a younger member named Tommy Raines on point. They'd been on the road for 6 hours. Tired, focused, just trying to get home. And then Tommy's front tire blew. Not a slow leak. A full blowout at 75 miles per hour. The bike wobbled violently. Tommy fought for control, tried to bring it down easy, but physics doesn't negotiate. The bike went sideways, hit the ground hard, and Tommy was thrown like a rag doll across 2 lanes of highway. Marcus saw it happen in slow motion. He screamed into his helmet mic, but it was too late. The other riders braked hard, swerved to avoid Tommy's bike sliding across the asphalt, sparks flying, metal screaming. A semi-truck was coming up fast in the right lane. The driver didn't see Tommy lying in the road, didn't see the bike. By the time he hit his brakes, it would be too late. And then a car swerved out of nowhere. A silver Honda Civic, beat-up college parking sticker on the back window. It cut across 2 lanes, positioned itself between Tommy and the semi, horn blaring, hazards flashing. The truck driver saw it, saw the crazy car blocking the lane. He yanked the wheel hard, swerved into the shoulder, tires shredding, air brakes screaming. He missed Tommy by 6 feet. The car stopped right next to Tommy's body. The door flew open, and a young woman jumped out. Early 20s, ponytail, wearing scrubs. She didn't hesitate, didn't wait for traffic to clear. She ran straight to Tommy. Marcus and the others had already pulled over, were running back. But she was faster. By the time they reached Tommy, she was already checking his vitals, her hands moving with precision and speed. "I'm a nursing student," she said without looking up. "He's got a pulse, but it's weak. Possible head trauma, definitely broken bones. We need an ambulance now." Marcus pulled out his phone, called 911. The other riders formed a protective circle around Tommy and the woman, stopping traffic, making sure nobody got close. She kept working. Checked Tommy's neck, stabilized his head, talked to him even though he was unconscious. "Stay with us. You're going to be okay. Help is coming." Blood was pooling under Tommy's head. His breathing was shallow, labored. Without her intervention in those first 90 seconds, he would have died right there on that highway. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later. Paramedics loaded Tommy onto a stretcher. The woman gave them a rapid-fire briefing, medical terms Marcus didn't understand, but could tell were important. As they loaded Tommy into the ambulance, Marcus turned to thank her properly, but she was already getting back in her car. He called out to her, "Wait, please. What's your name?" She turned, smiled. Tired, covered in blood that wasn't hers, but she smiled. "Sarah? Sarah Morrison. Sarah, you just saved my brother's life. We owe you. Anything you need, ever, you call us." She shook her head. "I did what anyone should do. I'm just glad I was here." Marcus pulled a card from his wallet. Not a business card, a challenge coin. Heavy, worn, with the Outlaws MC insignia on one side and a single word on the other, brother. "This is yours," he said. "You earned it. And if you ever need us, you show this to any outlaw you see. They'll know. They'll help. That's a promise." Sarah took the coin, looked at it, seemed like she wanted to say something but didn't. She just nodded, got in her car, and drove away. Marcus stood there in the middle of the highway, watching her taillights disappear. Tommy survived. Spent 3 months in the hospital. Broken leg, fractured skull, internal bleeding. But he lived. And when he finally got out, when he came back to the clubhouse, the first thing he asked was, "Did we find her? Did we thank her?" They tried. Ran the plates. Found out the car was registered to a Frank Morrison in a small town outside Austin. They went there, knocked on doors, asked around. But Sarah Morrison had already left. Graduated nursing school early, took a job at a hospital in Houston, moved into an apartment with 2 roommates. No landline, no social media footprint, no easy way to track her down. The club put the word out. If anyone saw a young woman named Sarah Morrison with an Outlaws Challenge coin, they were to report back immediately. But months turned into years and Sarah never appeared. Marcus never forgot. He had the club's tattoo artist create a custom piece. A guardian angel with broken wings, small, subtle, on his right forearm. A reminder. A debt unpaid. And he swore that if Sarah Morrison ever needed help, if she ever called in that promise, he would move heaven and earth to be there. Now, back to that gas station parking lot. 2 a.m., November 2024. Marcus Reaper Dalton staring down at Frank Morrison, this old man who just said his granddaughter has a tattoo like Marcus's. "What did you just say?" Marcus repeated. Frank didn't flinch. He'd stared down the Viet Cong in the Mekong Delta. A biker in a Texas gas station didn't scare him. "My granddaughter," Frank said slowly. "Sarah Morrison. She has a tattoo on her shoulder, a guardian angel with broken wings, same as the one on your arm." Time stopped. Marcus's hand went to his forearm, fingers tracing the ink he'd worn for 15 years. His mind was racing, heart pounding. "Sarah Morrison," he said quietly. "Where is she?" And that's when Frank's composure cracked. Just a little. His eyes got wet. His voice shook. "That's why I'm here. She's in trouble. Bad trouble. And I don't know what to do." Here's what you need to understand. Frank Morrison had been looking for Sarah for 3 days. She'd missed Sunday dinner. That wasn't like her. Sarah called every Sunday, came over when she could, never missed without calling. But this Sunday, nothing. Straight to voicemail. Monday, still nothing. Frank drove to her apartment in Houston, 2-hour drive, knocked on her door. Her roommate answered, looked worried. "She hasn't been home in 4 days, the roommate said. Said she was going to help a friend move, but she never came back. I've been calling. Nothing." Frank felt his stomach drop. Something was wrong. He called the police. They took a report but weren't concerned. "She's an adult, sir. Probably just busy. Give it a few more days." But Frank knew his granddaughter. Knew her routines. Her habits. Sarah didn't just disappear. He started digging, called her hospital. They said she'd taken a week off. Personal time. Called her friends. Nobody had seen her. And then he found something. On Sarah's desk in her apartment, hidden under some mail, a piece of paper. An address. A town called Brackett, Texas. Middle of nowhere. And next to the address, 3 words in Sarah's handwriting. "Help Maria. Urgent." Frank didn't know who Maria was, but he knew that address. Brackett was a small border town, population maybe 2,000, the kind of place that showed up in news stories about cartel activity and human trafficking. And Sarah had gone there alone. Frank drove to Brackett that same day. The address led him to a small house on the edge of town. Windows boarded up. No cars outside. He knocked. No answer. A neighbor came out, and an old Hispanic woman who looked at Frank like he was crazy. "You looking for the girl?" she asked in broken English. "Yes." "Young woman? Blonde? Late 20s. The woman shook her head. "She came 3 days ago, asking about Maria Vasquez. I told her to leave. Told her it's not safe. But she didn't listen." "What happened to her?" The woman's eyes filled with fear. "Men came, big truck. They took her. I couldn't do anything. I'm sorry." Frank felt his blood go cold. "Who took her? Where?" The woman just shook her head and went back inside, locked her door. Frank went to the local police. They took a report, but he could see it in their eyes. They weren't going to do anything. Either they were scared or they were paid off. Either way, Sarah wasn't their priority. Frank spent 2 days driving around Brackett, asking questions, getting nowhere. And then he remembered something. Years ago, after Sarah had come home from that accident on Interstate 10, she'd shown him a coin. A challenge coin with a motorcycle club insignia. She'd told him about the bikers, about saving someone's life, about a promise. Frank had told her to throw it away. "Those people are dangerous," he'd said. "You don't want to be mixed up with them." But Sarah had kept it. He'd seen it on her dresser. And if she'd gone missing, if she was in real danger, maybe that coin was still there. He drove back to Houston, went through her apartment, found the coin in a small wooden box under her bed. Outlaws, MC Texas chapter. Frank didn't know anything about motorcycle clubs. Didn't know how to find them. But he knew they rode at night. Knew they stopped at gas stations, truck stops, diners. So for the last 24 hours, Frank had been driving. Stopping at every gas station between Houston and the border. Waiting. Watching. And then, at 2 a.m. in a nowhere town outside Del Rio, 5 motorcycles pulled into a gas station, and the lead rider had a tattoo Frank recognized. Marcus listened to Frank's story without interrupting. The other riders gathered close, silent, focused. When Frank finished, Marcus looked at his brothers. "Richie, call the chapter. Get everyone mobilized. Hack. Start running intel on Brackett. I want to know every cartel connection, every dirty cop, every place they could be holding someone." He turned back to Frank. "Mr. Morrison, your granddaughter saved one of ours 15 years ago. That debt has never been forgotten. And now, we're going to return the favor." Frank's voice shook. "I don't have money to pay you. I don't have—" Marcus cut him off. "We don't want your money. Family doesn't charge family." And Sarah became family the moment she stopped on that highway. Within an hour, 23 motorcycles were on the road. The entire Texas chapter, moving as one unit, heading toward Brackett. Frank rode in the chase vehicle with 2 of the older members. They gave him a vest to wear. Protection, a symbol that he was under their watch. As they drove through the darkness, one of the riders, a man named Cope, told Frank something he'd never forget. "People think we're outlaws because we break laws. That's not it. We're outlaws because we live by a code that's older than any law. Loyalty, honor, protection. Your granddaughter understood that code better than most people who wear patches. And that's why we'll burn this whole town down if we have to." They reached Brackett just before dawn. The convoy parked outside town, out of sight. Marcus sent 2 members in on foot to scout. They came back 30 minutes later with information. Sarah was being held in an old warehouse on the east side of town. The building was owned by a shell company, but everyone knew it was run by a man named Hector Ruiz. Mid-level cartel operative, he used the warehouse as a holding facility for people being trafficked across the border. Sarah had come to Brackett looking for Maria Vasquez, a young woman she'd met at the hospital. Maria had been brought in with injuries from a trafficking operation. She'd begged Sarah not to report it, said if the men found out she'd talked, they'd kill her family. But Sarah couldn't let it go, and she started investigating quietly, found out where Maria's family was being held, and tried to get them out herself. She'd been caught. And now she was being held as leverage. They were going to move her across the border. Use her as an example of what happens when people interfere. Marcus listened to all this with a face like stone. Then he made the call. "We go in tonight, quiet, fast. Nobody gets hurt except the people who need to get hurt." At 11 p.m., the operation began. The outlaws moved like shadows. Years of operating outside the law had taught them how to be invisible when they needed to be. They cut the power to the warehouse, disabled the security cameras, positioned themselves at every exit. Marcus went in first, through a side door that had been left unlocked by a warehouse worker they'd paid off an hour earlier. The inside was dark, filled with shipping containers and crates. And in the back, behind a locked door, they found them. Sarah, Maria's mother and 2 younger siblings. All of them tied up, scared, alive. Marcus cut Sarah's restraints. She looked up at him, eyes wide, disbelieving. "How did you—" "Your grandfather," Marcus said. "He found us. Now let's get you out of here." But it wasn't that simple. Hector Ruiz and 4 of his men were in an office upstairs. They heard the commotion, came down armed, ready for a fight. What they found was 23 bikers waiting for them. It wasn't a fight. It was a statement. Hector pulled a gun. Never got a shot off. Marcus disarmed him in 3 seconds flat, had him on the ground, knee on his throat. You touch her again, Marcus said quietly. You even think about her. And I promise you'll disappear in ways you can't imagine. Understand? Hector nodded, gasping for air. The outlaws left with Sarah, Maria, and her family. They called ICE anonymously, reported the warehouse. By the time law enforcement arrived, the bikers were long gone. Frank was waiting at the rally point when they pulled up. Sarah climbed out of the van and ran into his arms. Grandpa, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Frank held her tight, tears streaming down his weathered face. Don't you ever scare me like that again? Ever. She pulled back, looked at Marcus. You came. After all these years, you came. Marcus smiled. Just a little. I made you a promise. We don't forget promises. Sarah looked at the guardian angel tattoo on his arm, the same one she had on her shoulder. She'd gotten it 5 years ago, as a reminder of that day on the highway, a reminder that she'd been in the right place at the right time, that she'd made a difference. She never thought she'd see these men again, never thought that promise would be called in. But here they were. 3 weeks later, Frank received a package, no return address. Inside was a framed photograph, 23 motorcycles lined up on an open road at sunset, and written on the back in careful handwriting. Family isn't blood, it's promises kept. Always. Frank hung it in his living room, right next to his military medals, right next to the photos of his late wife. And every time someone asked him about it, he told them the truth. That sometimes the people society tells you to fear are the ones who will stand between you and the darkness. That sometimes a single act of kindness creates a ripple that never stops. That loyalty, real loyalty, doesn't have an expiration date. Sarah went back to work at the hospital, but she kept that challenge coin, kept it close. Maria and her family were relocated, given new identities, a fresh start. Away from the men who'd tried to use them. And the outlaws. MC? They went back to their lives, back to their rides, back to the code they'd always lived by. But every member of that Texas chapter knew the story. Knew about Sarah Morrison. Knew about Frank Morrison. Knew about the night they rode to the border and brought one of their own home. Because that's what family does. So let me ask you this. When you see bikers on the highway, when you see people who look different from you, who live by rules you don't understand, and what do you see? Danger? Outlaws? People to avoid? Or do you see human beings? Brothers and sisters bound by something deeper than blood? The choice is yours. But remember this, the world is more complicated than fear and assumptions. People are more than their appearances. And sometimes the scariest looking people are the ones with the biggest hearts. If this story hit you, drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever misjudged someone based on how they looked? Have you ever been surprised by kindness from an unexpected place? And if this resonated with you, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this need to be told. They need to be remembered. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we've got more stories like this coming. Real stories, human stories. Stories that'll make you question everything you thought you knew. Thanks for watching. And remember, family isn't blood, it's promises kept. Always.